Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sabbe sankhara anicca, sabbe sankhara dukkha, sabbe dhamma anattati. Cool, God. I'd like to ask leave from the Sangha to say a few words this afternoon and express my appreciation. Welcome the lay people who have come, and it's very nice to see a large crowd here this afternoon, not just to have lots of people coming, but particularly this is our first Sunday, you could say open again, open house, moving bit by bit back to a more normal feeling, both in the monastery but in the area. I think it's a very healing thing for the spiritual community. There must be several in the area to be being reactivating, and for that part of our lives to be flourishing again. And in time, this sort of slow process of normalizing and healing will have to take place bit by bit. I saw it very clearly in the south of Thailand I think it was 2003, when there was a big tsunami there, affected many provinces. And going down there and then bit by bit, just saw how things healed slowly, and that the spiritual side, the community side, was a crucial part of that. So here we are, we have these Sunday afternoon sharings where we do some chanting, sit meditation together. We all come from different places and then just sit silently, don't talk to each other for an hour. It's very nice. We should do that more often. And then the idea being that our minds are then ripe, ready, in a good space to share some Dhamma or listen to some Dhamma, and also internally we all have a bit of a conversation going on with ourselves, or several at the same time. And so that silent mind can assist that, or encourage or nurture that. The chanting often depends on the mood of the person leading the chanting, but sometimes causes and conditions or circumstances. And today we did the funeral chants as very typical way to begin and carry on with our Dhamma practice. We just heard the news, very unfortunate, a friend of ours, community member, his brother's passed away very suddenly. And this is the third time we've done the funeral chants this week. We did one round a few days ago. We had that was on the night of the king's cremation in Thailand, but also somebody I know, part of the Los Angeles Buddhist community, a young man, age 34, who had cancer. And when we were there in April, I visited him, and it was in the middle of that whole cancer treatment kind of thing, going to hospitals, there's this therapy, there's that one, they're kind of mixing, the doctors are going to try this. There was that whole energy, but 6 months later, his time has come to an end. And then a few days later, a couple of nights later, again, another young man connected with the monastery, not 34 this time, 24, I think, 23, had died tragically as well. And now a man in his 50s. So in a week we have a few people to think about that we know, and there's so many more. But again, the ages, 24, 34, 50, and the king, who is an old man. So this thing, we know, we chant the death and dying very frequently. The reflection is that the reflection at the heart of the Buddha's going forth, and the heart of what stimulates a lot of us to think, what's it all about? You know, when we're coming to make sense of the world, or trying to, or we're triggered to begin to think, it's often this whole principle of what's it all about, when we know that not just maybe a long way down the line, but maybe tomorrow, what we experience as the world and life, may just end. And so this is a role that say religion plays or spirituality plays. Not only starts our search, but then people come and find comfort. That's why our relatives come to monasteries for funerals, and they ask to listen to some chanting. It brings comfort. And the important thing is that actually in our chanting we weren't chanting and saying, we asked the Lord Buddha to receive the soul of the dear departed and grant mercy. And there were no specific rites and rituals. There was no technical details around lighting of the candles and flowers that somehow brought a sacred aspect in the sacred, in the supernatural, magical, religious sense. But it was religious and spiritual in the sense that there's meaning there. And also everyone's joining in, so it's not the monks chanting in a more ritualized, priestly way. Actually, we can all join in and share in those words of Dhamma. The heart of what we chanted in Pali, essentially you could kind of sum up the whole thing as conditionality, causes and conditions. And so at the heart of, say, a Buddhist funeral, which has obviously become quite ritualized over the, not just centuries, but 2.5 millennia, at the heart of it all is this sense that this is part of a process of causes and conditions, absolutely natural, and simply the understanding of this, the mind, the body arising, passing away. This is what brings us comfort, because discomfort arises through not understanding. And so that was what we were chanting. That's what we're doing. And so, actually, for a lot of Thais, the only or the most common time they'll go to a temple or a monastery is funerals. It's kind of very much associated. And when monks get invited to the house, it's funeral. So it's this aspect of our life which is giving comfort. Now, at the same time, as we all know, religion has historically and especially today has that side of it which is getting a very bad name. And most of us have come from the more, you could say, secular, personal side of things, where we take on, especially coming to Dharma, Buddhism. We like to use words like it's a way of life, it's a philosophy, it's a path of personal growth, inner growth. It's a spiritual path rather than a religious path. Lots of people would rather not say it's not a religion. And it's of great comfort to a lot of us that, in a sense, the path begins with what we could call very simple, universal principles. You can kind of distill it down to generosity, ethics, loving kindness, brahmaviharas, so the principle of non-harming. Right livelihood, restraint and simplicity. This, I think, for most of us, is how we would form our kind of principles or the foundations. And then, of course, meditation, and then developing vipassana, wisdom for those people that want to take it further. But it's certainly not grounded in very much in much culture, certainly in the West, and even in modern Thais, modern Sri Lankans, modern people in modern in these days in Buddhist cultures, often get into the Dharma when they come abroad to study, having not really understood much or been much interested. And certainly, I myself, I've said this before, growing up in England, although schools are generally Christian and associated with the church, and you go to services, but the feeling is very secular and non-religious. I hardly knew anybody who really took religion seriously. And as you study history, you're also very aware of all the dukkha, all the harm, all the wars, all the kind of, you could say, the bad things that are done in the name of religion. So it has quite a bad reputation, as it were, as you're growing up. And of course, you're balancing it with science. So much of the things you're learning, the schools are encouraging and teaching. Basically, it's very hard to combine them. So they don't really try very hard, certainly my school, to combine a kind of Christian religious worldview with a modern one that was more or less kept totally separate. Yet nevertheless, we just find ourselves drawn somehow to those things which are not material. You know, we're drawn to, and we find what works for us. So there's this quote, which many of us are probably familiar with, remember, from Karl Marx, who said, religion is the opium of the masses. That's a kind of cliche, or it's kind of very, very commonly referred to, and it can be used, sort of sounds like a real criticism. It can be of religion, but even say of spiritual life, this kind of inner search as well. And I kind of, that was one that I always thought of. I always had this very, very negative view about institutionalized religions and organizations. But then one time I Googled it again. I Google these things sometimes. What exactly did he say? And it's much more interesting than that. And again, with quotes, you never know until you know the real context. But actually, the full quote is, it goes, religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature. It is the heart in a heartless world. It is the spirit in a spiritless society. It is the opiate of the people. And so that gives it a different context, the fuller version. It's certainly not so critical. And this expression, the sigh of the oppressed. Now we all know that a lot of it was talking about, say, social injustice. But most of us probably didn't feel really oppressed as we're growing up. I certainly didn't. Never felt I needed to embark in class struggle to improve my lot in life. Yet nevertheless, we have this feeling, we can connect with this feeling of being oppressed somehow. And we're looking for heart in a heartless world. As we look around, and why does this world seem so heartless? And often society seems so spiritless. And an opiate can often be not so bad. If somebody's really suffering, there's a kind of palliative care. Sometimes there's no option. It's perhaps not. It's not in a sense a final cure, but relief and comfort is not such a bad thing. So it doesn't necessarily have to have such negative implications. And so it's just something that I've been thinking of all these years in being drawn towards what we could call religion, spiritual life, and really feeling that this is important, yet at the same time knowing and seeing just how dark it can get, of the importance of distilling or teasing out the various elements, the various factors, and ultimately basically relying on my own integrity. What is it that I'm doing, and the community that I, say, associate with, and knowing that I can't worry too much about the global picture. It's too complicated. There's too many factors involved, too much history, it's like the environment, too many things that for me to fix if I want to just have it perfect. And so I can focus, and we can all do this, focus on what is important. Yet nevertheless, not what we call throw out the baby with the bathwater. Still appreciate that there are lots of elements of the extended culture that are supportive. Yet nevertheless, finding what for us is the essence. Using the externals, using the conventions, that's fine, but finding the essence. So another example of that was last weekend when a few of us went down to Wat Buddhanuson in Fremont for an event for the Thai community to commemorate the late king close to his cremation. And actually Ajahn Karunadhamma already has said a few words on that. But it's a very good example of, say, cultural religion as it kind of manifests and expresses in this day and age. You have Thais living in America, got a monastery in the suburbs of San Francisco, and a huge picture of the king, and a kind of huge poster of a picture of the cremation site in Bangkok, so that you can look at it and sort of generate this feeling that you're in Bangkok. And sort of somehow present at the cremation of your beloved king. And then there are monks, you're in a monastery, so it's kind of religious. You make offerings, you undertake precepts, you listen to a Dhamma talk. So it's this real, and of course you eat great food and masses of food, lots of Thai food, crucial element of any Thai religious event. Probably the main reason people going. And then the monks do some chanting as well. And again, it's a pity that we don't understand the chanting. But so clothed in all of that culture, in all of that, and the culture is not just Thai and Buddhist. There's a lot of, if you know what to look for, there's a lot of Brahmanism in there. A lot of Thai Buddhism has its links in Brahmanism. There's a bit of animism thrown in there. So it's the kind of the full range of what you could call culture rather than religion per se. As well as in the point is grieving and processing grief. It's a year after the king passed away, so that whole kind of process has been taking place. So you can look at it, it's really interesting what's going on. And then at the heart of it was this teaching, the monks do some chanting. And the monks basically in Pali say, whether a Buddha arises or doesn't arise, there is this element of Dhamma, this fixed element of Dhamma. There's this fixed law of Dhamma, which is all conditioned phenomena are impermanent, all conditioned phenomena are dukkha or unsatisfactory, all things, everything that, all Dhammas, anything that we can experience, we can refer to, think about, is anatta. There can be no self or no essence. And also, again, the implications of atta or atman is nothing holy in it. There's nothing sacred. Atman, atta in Indian culture had the essence of Brahman. It was sacred. So there was this sense of everything is somehow sacred and comes from a first cause. The Buddha is saying you can't ever find that. So again, pointing to the conditionality, the impersonality, and the leading onwards and onwards, the emptiness of things. And so that's there in the middle of all of the kind of the ritual and the culture is, again, very, very personal teachings, if you like. Personal in the sense that we can take that on and investigate that and then use that in our lives. And then the language is very beautiful. It then goes on to say, so this, the Buddha has awakened to this, has realized this, and then proclaims it, teaches it, reveals it, elucidates it, analyzes it. So again, it's making the point that these are universal, timeless truths, but luckily it's been very, very nicely made clear for us in many ways. And so again, this is the heart of what we're doing, and this is what we can all just keep coming back to. As I've said, we're all generally thinkers. We have this capacity to use these words and conventions well. And this kind of language, Dhammatitata, which means standing on Dhamma, there's this fixed establishment of Dhamma. It's like a universal thing, like a universal law. Dhamma niyamata, the law of Dhamma. And all of this points to, or it leads us, for those who have ears and those who have eyes to see and want to contemplate it, towards then, this whole letting go. But it's within a context of the lives we're living, and trying to find ways to apply it more and more. So we have to take it away and think about it, but on no better occasion than aging, sickness, and death, because that's really the thing which is obviously so painful and so difficult. Yet we all have to. This is the undeniable thing which we all have to relate to, or we all have to deal with. And it leads us towards thinking, obviously, about our lives and about when we look at the world, and we're often thinking, well, how does this work? What are the causes and conditions that make the world that how's this all ticking? Yesterday I was talking to somebody who's an ecologist doing a doctorate, and again, that's one aspect of understanding the world. We can look at the ecology and analyzing moths. But you can get a lot of an understanding of the bigger picture through looking at looking at a species and seeing how its population rises and falls, these kinds of things. And looking at history, so we can learn a lot. We can learn a lot from these things which have been the bad times in history, or the unpleasant times, the wars, the problems. But essentially, we know we can't really solve them externally. Certainly the past we can't change. And even the present and the future, the global situation is a bit too big. Yet nevertheless, we can learn from it. I see more and more how the world is basically a manifestation of our minds. When I say the world, certainly the human world, what we call society. The Buddha said, Mano pubangama dhamma, mano seta manomaya. Mind, from mind springs all phenomena. Mind made things, mind leads the world. Mind is the chief. So of course, everything that we experience and everything that we see, somehow people have done it. And so that's arisen from you could say the spirit, the feeling, or the thoughts, the moods of people. Things, society doesn't just happen on its own. So yesterday there was a Thai family visited here. They came here and they had parents and a couple of kids, their two sons, aged 17 and 20. And they've moved over here. They've been here for a year. They're studying. One's at high school, one's at university. And they came and we had some business to talk to them about. And they said they were keen for their sons to learn a bit about Buddhism and meditation. So we had half an hour before the meal, and we sat down and we gave a little bit of an overview of some basic principles of Dhamma, which they knew. One of them had been on a course before, a little meditation course in Thailand. And I asked him, why do you meditate? And he basically said, very simply, it's about bringing the mind into the present moment, trying to be peaceful. So I said, well, why would you want to do that? He said, well, life's just very stressful and busy, and it's good to calm down. So I thought, pretty good, not bad for a 20-year-old. I kind of talk to kids when their parents are there, because you want the parents to hear it, because they're often the ones that don't really get it. So they're kind of talking to the kids, so, why would you, and what's the benefit of, being less stressed and this and that, and the parents are sitting there kind of nodding, and they think, this sounds really good. And then we sat meditation for a while. It was very sweet. Talked a bit about metta, and then it was time for the meal. So we were just waiting for a couple of minutes before the meal, so I just asked the younger one, who'd been a bit quiet. So I said, how are you doing? And asked him what class he was in at school. So I said, well, what's your favorite subject? And he said, history. I said, what period of history are you into? And he said, I like modern history, European history, World War I, World War II. So I thought, that's interesting. He was kind of quite, actually once I talked to him, quite engaging. Thai kids are often, they kind of clam up, they're not very responsive. So I remember from when I studied history at school, when you study World War I, there are some classic questions that always come up in the exams. It's like, why did World War I begin? Why did it last so long? Because it was supposed to be over by Christmas, and it ended up lasting 4 years. And then finally, why did Germany lose? So again, just kind of like, kind of have a bit of a chat to him. So I said, okay, you're into World War I. Tell me why it began. And he was a bit sort of surprised, a bit shocked. But then he said, yeah, it was this, Europe, it was like lots of different groups of power, and then there was somebody was killed. I was going, yeah, who's that? And he said, he was Ferdinand. So he kind of got to it. Yeah, that's right. Archduke Franz Ferdinand was shot. So I said, well, where? He said, in Sarajevo. So he actually knew. It was quite good. He knew his stuff. And then it was basically time for the meal. So we didn't carry on. But then just a bit later, there was him and his brother. So I said to him, remember what you said about how Archduke Franz Ferdinand was shot in Sarajevo? Do you remember that particular incident, that gunshot? It triggered World War I, like you said. Do you remember it earned itself a a title or a kind of a moniker, a name, because it was such a famous and important event. What was that incident called, that shooting? And they both said, oh yeah, they kind of knew that. And then one of them said, oh, it was the shot that was heard, was it the shot that was heard around the world? I said, yeah, that's right. I'd learnt it as the shot that rang out around the world. So I said, right, why was it called the shot that rang out around the world? And they said, well, because one person shot one guy in Sarajevo, and then it triggered the First World War in Europe, and then America joined in, and then it became the World War. So I said, right, great. And then we kind of carried on a bit, and then that was led to a lot of the things of the Second World War, and then you see how these things just carry on, just from... So then I said to them, so look, if a bad thing like a single shooting can ring out around the world and can create a whole stream setting process, a whole avalanche, a whole tsunami, do you think a good thing can? And they went, yeah. So that was kind of nice. Kind of Thai kids are kind of quite sweet and easy to teach. But kids in general, they get it in general, these simple things. And it's a nice thought, isn't it? We're focusing on the bad, and we're focusing on, oh, it's all so terrible, and then what can you do? But when you look at these bad things and the things, there are causes and conditions. I mean, they're literally triggers. In this case, it was literally a trigger. And so the Buddha pointed to this very simply. He said, don't analyze the law of karma quite wisely, because if you get into it, there's no end, right? Because, of course, it's not just a single shot really that did it. It had to be part of a huge, complex set of causes and conditions. But certainly it's a pivotal or a key moment which we can all look at and point to. But really it's the whole process. It's beyond beyond the ken, beyond us figuring out what to do. And it's a bit like the world today. But if we take that example, by the same token then, if we just it's that principle of doing good things, we can't really know and see sometimes how it's working. So it's, some people kind of like to use the language of, the mystery of the universe and, the unfathomable, the unimaginable, mystery of life. But we take this view, this perspective, that by doing good things, bit by bit, drop by drop, both within ourselves, the Buddha said the great water jar gets filled up, but also when it comes to looking at the bigger picture, like talking about the environment yesterday, and talking about the world, the heat in the world, in global warming. It's our own global warming. We're our own little environment, we're our own little world, and we're hot. And that's why the whole world gets hot. But bit by bit then we can kind of cool ourselves down, and that much I think we can do. And you never know, that may be not the shot that rings out around the world, but the cool action that helps, cool the world down a little bit. So it's just a nice little thought that essentially, and it's a way of bringing our religion, if you like, away from a kind of being part of a mass thing, which we are at times. We're part of a bigger picture. You can't take that away in the same way that, American citizens, you're part of the US. You may not like everything that happens here, identify with everything done in the name of your country, but you don't have to. And you can certainly, be good. The little good bits and pieces that we do obviously make for you could say in a way, for a better place. That much we can do. So it's a very nice way to look at things, where we can find peace and comfort. Just like in a death, oh, it's so tragic. Well, yeah, all conditioned things are impermanent. All conditioned things are dukkha. The Buddha was saying it's all right for things to be unsatisfactory because they have to be. They can't not be. And we don't have to fix it and make it any other way. And the way he taught us to do is very interesting. He realized his enlightenment, having been born a prince, as you know the story, born a prince, and then went off into the jungle, and after a long struggle, epic struggle, got enlightened. And then his father, the king, sent messengers repeatedly once he tracked him down to bring him back, bring my son back, I need him. Now he's enlightened, he can come and take over the throne, kind of thing. That was the plan. And then finally the Buddha did return home when his father was near death. Taught the people of the towns Kapilavatthu, and the kingdom is called the Sakyan kingdom. And they got faith. After a while, a little bit of resistance, but they got it. And then the king died. And so the Buddha was still the prince, effectively. I mean, he'd renounced the throne, but as far as the people were concerned, he was still there. So he was back. He's a fully enlightened man, prince. You can imagine that they would have actually wanted him to stay and take over. And the Buddha could have taken that on and sort of established the world's first kind of, the Buddhist Republic of Sakyan Kingdom, something like that, and ruled as a righteous Dharma ruler, bringing the Dharma and bringing goodness to his people. But he said, okay, I'm off, and walked a few hundred miles east to Rajagaha, where there was a thriving kind of group of spiritual ascetics, you could say, who he felt he wanted to teach. And so he deliberately, consciously didn't, say, mix his spiritual path with politics, or mix that, or even want to kind of necessarily focus on fixing the world, say, making it right, making it good. He taught individuals. There were times when he taught people or made statements around society, but only to the extent that then people are free to pick up on it and figure it out for themselves, never imposing it, because that's not in line with the law of nature. Just like the forest, all these trees and acorns and woodpeckers and stuff, they're totally free to do their thing. There's a system, you could say there are rules governing what they can and can't do, but ultimately we let it go. And the world survived very nicely when it was just arising and passing away according to causes and conditions. And now it's kind of happening again. There are new causes and conditions, but no one can really control it. And so again, there's a very beautiful and powerful lesson for us, say in our spiritual practice. We can interact, like you can come and listen to some Dhamma, I can say some words. Or what you go and do in your lives, totally your business. I don't mind, we say goodbye and we say goodbye. And so we turn inwards. We turn inwards and we do our own Dharma practice, and that's how we, you could say, we grow, and we also play our little part. So I've said a few words today. I'd just maybe take this chance. This is probably my last little sharing or Dhamma talk. I'll be leaving next week to go back to Thailand. It's been very nice, and I recognize now a lot of the faces, although I must say I haven't learned or even asked anybody's name hardly. I've got to know Sandra and Dee for unfortunate reasons, but it's been very nice getting to know you better over the last 2 weeks. So it's been very nice, and I definitely want to wish everyone all the best, and just keep encouraging us that we are. This is a very engaged life, engaged world we live in, and monastic life is engaged. But as the Buddha said, no Dhamma whatsoever should be clung to. And so there's always these paradoxes in Dhamma life, in life. So obviously we love each other, but we have to not cling to each other. We have to let go. We build a beautiful monastery and then let go because it can burn down. So this is a part of our life. So I just end, as you know, I like words. I've been contemplating words over this retreat, and it's been interesting coming out of Thailand. Which I live in Wat Pah Chat, which is where we speak English, but it's not say an English-speaking country, and so in terms of some of the sort of the changes in language, times when I visited the West, I've noticed as like after 10 years, 20 years, little new expressions, new ways of using words are kind of creeping in because language is very fluid. Of course, slang is very, very kind of very vibrant, but I just mean in terms of normal things, and also coming to the States, just hearing subtly different uses of words or phrases. So I have a little Dhamma reflection. I've been kind of thinking about these things, because the Buddha, Luang Por Chah, they were really into using language in a way which you have a meaning, or you have a word, but you also kind of give it a new meaning, or you kind of turn it round, and it can just help stick in the mind. So there's a few phrases I've been hearing over the last few months, which sort of seem to be becoming like more common, and we use them, and it's appropriate. They have good meaning, but then we can also kind of use them in a different way, in a sort of Dharma way. So very simple things. So the first the first expression I've been hearing a lot, especially lately, is this word first responder. I'd never heard that before. I was growing up in England, we didn't talk about first responders. So now I understand that first responders, they're these great people. I really appreciate them like everyone else. And there's signs on the highway. The casinos are thanking them. Are those signs still up as you drive up? See, even the casinos appreciate them. See, they're not all bad. So they're the wonderful firemen and the ambulance people and the policemen and even neighbors. Yeah, neighbors, right? They were our first responders. And so we have first responders, and they're good. But in Dhamma life, we're often, it's often about slowing down, and so much, say, harm and so much heedlessness or just thoughtlessness can be done with very, very quick responding. Another expression is that I've been hearing a lot is plug in. You get this a lot. You say, well, we're going to plug into that. And there's a lot of people plugging into the Sunday afternoon. It's great to see all of you plugging into Sunday afternoon. You see? Or like, Abhayagiri's plugged into the, the Theravadan scene in America, that kind of thing, or, right? Have you heard that? Have you heard plug in? I certainly have. Oh, yeah, everyone's really plugged in. It's good to be plugged in. But of course, as well, in the teaching of letting go and, looking beyond conventions into emptiness, we have to be careful how plugged in we are. And what being plugged in can do to us if we begin to identify it with it, and we begin to then attach to things, or we begin to then suffer over them. I mean, if we're too connected, if you do something, then I suffer. So we have to, again, it's this paradoxical middle way. Another one is reaching out. Have you heard that? So-and-so's, should we reach out to them? In the old days we'd say, should we get in contact? Or, should we, should I say something? But these days it's all about reaching out, or so-and-so's reaching out to us. It's quite nice. It has this sense of, we kind of all need, we'll get by with a little help from our friends. So just reach out, offer them some support, or they're reaching out to us, so we have to sort of be there for them. So we're reaching out. But again, reaching out is good, and being there for people. But in order for that relationship to be dharmic, if you say, to be correct, to be grounded in Dhamma, it has to come from truth. So that in Dhamma is found. We have to reach in. So we reach out. It's very good, but we have to reach in. So I've been thinking. So little motto then. So using first responders and plugging in and reaching out, you can say, be very careful with your responding. So first respond by not responding. Plug in but stay unplugged. Reach out by reaching in.
Reflection on Impermanence, Book 1, page 66.
Sabbe sankhara anicca, all conditioned things are impermanent. Sabbe sankhara dukkha, all conditioned things are dukkha. Sabe Dhamma anatta. Everything is void of self. Aduang jivitang. Life is not for sure. Duang maranang. Death is for sure. Awasang maya maritabang. It is inevitable that I'll die. Marana pariyosanang me jivitang. Death is the culmination of my life. Jivitang me aniyatang. My life is uncertain. Turanang me niyatang. My death is certain. Indeed, ayang kayo, this body, ajiram, will soon, apeta viññāno, be void of consciousness, chudo, and pass away. It will lie, patawing, on the ground, kalingarang iwa, just like a rotten log, niratang, completely void of use. Anicca vata sankhara, truly conditioned things cannot last. Upadavaya dhammino, in nature is to rise and fall. Uppajito anirujanti, having arisen things must cease. Te sangupasamo sukho, their stilling brings true happiness.
Closing Homage, Book 1, page 28. Arahant
Samma sambuddho bhagava, buddhang bhagavannang abhivade.
Swakato
Bhagavata Dhammo, Dhamma Namassam.
Siripañño
Bhagavata